www.anchor.fm/theforefront. Listen every week on Spotify, on iHeartRadio, and many other platforms. Welcome to the Forefront Radio. I'm your host, Afiel Levi. We reported back in 2020 that the United States would start to impose activists as quote-unquote terrorists. Now we have the evidence here available for you to see the proof that the United States is faking their war on terror to now target minorities and charge them with ridiculous things such as RICO charges, RICO cases, and terroristic activities for things such as passing out flyers. Remember, during the war on drugs, the United States used that as a war on minorities, war on blacks, Hispanics, Native Americans, by incarcerating them at higher extreme rates than others. Now watch this.
We're beginning today's show in Atlanta, Georgia, where the state's Republican Attorney General has announced a sweeping new RICO indictment against 61 activists and others he accuses of being part of a, quote, criminal enterprise to stop Cop City, a massive $90 million police training complex that's facing widespread opposition and ongoing protests. The charges were brought in Fulton County and approved by the same grand jury that indicted former President Donald Trump and 18 of his associates on RICO, or racketeering charges, brought by Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis, who is a Democrat. At a news conference Tuesday, Georgia Attorney General Chris Carr and John Fowler, head of Georgia's prosecution division, laid out their allegations and why they brought the case in Fulton County.
As alleged in the indictment, the defendants are members of Defend the Atlanta Forest, an anarchist, anti-police, and anti-business extremist organization. We contend these 61 defendants together have conspired to prevent the construction of the Atlanta Public Safety Training Center by conducting, coordinating, and organizing acts of violence, intimidation, and property destruction.
Why Fulton County and not DeKalb County? Georgia racketeering law allows that, and we availed ourselves of the Georgia racketeering law to do that. Anywhere that a predicate act or an overt act in furtherance of a conspiracy occurred, in any county where that occurred is where you can indict the case, and we chose Fulton County. When you allege a conspiracy to commit racketeering, there's no requirement under Georgia law that they know each other.
He literally just said out of his own mouth that there's no requirement for them to know each other. They're framing mischief by their laws. That's in the Bible.
The whole purpose of the Georgia racketeering law is that they're all working in some way, shape, or form towards the same goal, and they formed a conspiracy to do that. That doesn't necessarily mean that every person has to talk to every single person. All you have to do is commit one overt act in furtherance of the conspiracy with the others, and then you can be guilty of
So he basically just said, you're guilty because I say so. You're guilty because I say so. You don't even have to know the people, but you did the same act.
Racketeering. So that's why, is because it's a large case, and so if you want to tie everybody together and they're all trying to do the same thing, racketeering is the appropriate charge.
In addition to the 61 racketeering indictments, 5 people were also indicted on domestic terrorism and first-degree arson charges. 3 people with the Atlanta Solidarity Fund were each indicted on 15 counts of money laundering for their work to provide bail money and legal aid for protesters. The indictment was issued on September 5th and filed August 29th. The indictment alleges the protests included violent anti-police sentiment that's now one of the, quote, core driving motives of protests to stop Cop City. For more, we go to Atlanta, where we're joined by Kiana Jones, a Stop Cop City organizer for Community Movement Builders, and Devin Franklin, a movement policy counsel at the Southern Center for Human Rights. He worked over a decade as a public defender in Atlanta. His group has issued a call for lawyers to represent the 61 people now facing RICO charges. We welcome you both to Democracy Now! These are late-breaking developments. Devin, let's begin with you. Can you explain what happened Can you explain these RICO charges against 61 activists from the same Fulton County grand jury that approved the RICO charges against President Trump? But this was all led by the Republican Attorney General. Almost looks like a response to what Fani Willis did with the grand jury against President Trump and others.
Good morning. Yes, it certainly is a response, but I would argue that it is a response to the larger movement that has been as it pertains to several matters of police violence and government prejudice. It's just a lot going on, and I think that the state has shown that they don't have a meaningful way to respond to what the people are showing that they want, and they are choosing to use the legal process in a essentially violent way to target protesters. Yeah, it's really rare for this number of people to be included on an indictment. In my 12 years as a public defender in Fulton County, I never had a case that was this large or witnessed a case that was this large. And we look at the allegations that are included in the indictment, what we see are a wide variety of activities that are lawful, that are being deemed to be criminal. And that includes things such as passing out flyers, right?
When did passing out flyers become a criminal offense of terrorism? Listen to what they're doing, folks.
A really clear example of First Amendment, the exercise of First Amendment rights. We
know that this is retaliation for anyone who seeks to oppose the government here in Georgia. A very clear message was sent with this particular RICO indictment. We see that the date on this indictment reads May 25th, 2020, the date that George Floyd was murdered, the date that people all across this country stood up and said that enough is enough. We won't stand for police terror, excessive violence and brutality, and the senseless killings of innocent Black people around this country. Since that date, this country has been upended by governments across the nation trying to build cop cities in order to quell protests, because the government is simply upset that people seek to oppose and use their First Amendment right to protest when we see injustice coming from those in authority.
Ladies and gentlemen, you are seeing the proof that they are targeting minorities for acts of terrorism. Passing out flyers is terroristic acts.
And can you talk about examples of the charges? For example, handing out flyers, Kiana.
Yes, people were indicted for handing out flyers. And what those flyers contained, first of all, messages that say Stop Cop City, messages that give details about what Cop City truly is, that it is not just a public safety training facility, that it is actually a militarized training facility that would destroy 381 acres of forest land in a Black neighborhood where the city of Atlanta essentially had no jurisdiction in DeKalb County, but somehow backroom deals were made and laws were broken in order to acquire the land. Some of the flyers actually named the murderers of Manuel Esteban Paez Terán, known as Tortuguita. There is nothing that is wrong with giving information. So information that was obtained through public record that said, hey, there was a protester that was killed for sitting with their hands up. These are the perpetrators. We need justice. We want justice. I don't understand how giving out flyers with information is domestic terrorism. I don't understand how holding a sign that says Stop Cop City is domestic terrorism. I don't understand how opposing the government, using your legal right to protest, your right to freedom of speech, is domestic terrorism.
The Bible says you will be hated of all nations for my name's sake. The Bible says that those that live in truth will be persecuted by the wicked. The earth is given into the hand of the wicked, and it's high time that you awake out of sleep. Follow the Forefront Radio for more. We warned you in advance that domestic terrorism would be shown to minorities, and now you see the evidence right before your eyes. Thank you for listening. I hope you share this with many people. Let this go viral.